Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Hopewell Valley Central High School Financial Aid Night, 2021-2022. I'm not going to waste too much of your time speaking tonight because I want to turn the microphone over to our esteemed guest. But I do want to introduce myself. I started in the district over the summer as the new supervisor of counseling. My name is Dan DeStefano. I'm real excited to be in this role as a graduate of Central High School. It's exciting to be back here in this role. We're doing a lot of work this fall and each fall helping all of our seniors through the college application process. We hosted senior planning night a couple of weeks ago, and tonight we're going to piggyback on that with financial aid night. Financial aid obviously is a huge piece of the college admissions puzzle. And we're really, really pleased to be joined by Wil Casaine tonight for his kind of help in navigating that process. Wil is the Director of Financial Aid at the College of New Jersey. So we're not going to find a better subject matter expert than him. And without further ado, I'll turn the microphone over. I should note, we do have a Q&A open and a chat open, so feel free to enter any questions you might have in there, and we will try to answer those questions as we go along when they're relevant to the conversation, and then two, at the end we'll try to field any questions that might have gone unanswered throughout the program. We will be recording this program and we will be distributing it afterwards, so we'll post it via social media. We will email it out and it'll be posted on our counseling website. So Wil, take it over.
Thank you, Dan. I appreciate it. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having me tonight. I'm glad Mr. DeStefano mentioned that the presentation is going to be recorded. It's going to be sent out. It's going to be available, because I can guarantee you that although the presentation is a nice basic financial aid presentation, you are still going to be very overwhelmed after you experience this. It is a lot of information to cover in a very short time. But again, don't fret, don't despair. It is normal to experience brain overload after you go through this presentation. But again, you'll have the presentation to refer back to. Hopefully, after a few days, after this thing sinks in, if you have any additional questions, refer back to the presentation. If not, you can always reach out to the guidance office at the high school, and they will be able to assist. And if not, they can always reach out to someone like me, a school contact, that can help you out with any questions that you may have. Okay, so with that, we'll get started. So what are we going to cover tonight? Oops, let me just get this out of the way. I apologize. So what are we going to cover? We're going to cover the types and sources of aid, the application process, the financial aid package, and then other useful information. But before we start, I want to point this out. So every college and university in the United States is required by law to have what's called a net price calculator. Okay, usually it's located either on the financial aid website of the college or the admissions website of the school. And what this basically is, it's a mini financial aid application. It should take you no more than 5 minutes to complete. And what it does is, you enter all your personal information, income, household side, things like that. And the results that are spit out are basically a first-time freshman student attending that school who meets the same criteria that you just indicated on this net price calculator application. It'll tell you on an estimate of how much financial aid they're receiving during their first year, okay? What that allows you to do is, as your sons and daughters are kind of picking out colleges that they're going to attend, I would say perhaps, pick out their top 2, their top 3, go out to the school's website, find this net price calculator, and spend the 5 minutes on each site completing the application, so that at least you can receive an estimate of what that first-time full-time degree-seeking student receives there. And it'll kind of give you an idea of whether that student is very generous with their aid, or that school is very stingy with their aid. Okay, and perhaps that'll help you to kind of start shaping the conversation to the school that is more generous with their financial aid. Here's a copy of screenshot of what ours looks like at TCNJ. It could look, many different ways at the different schools, but I recommend that you go out and look for it. So section 1, the sources and types of aid. So when you apply for financial aid, that financial aid application, and I'm going to go over the applications in the second section, that financial aid application is sent to the sources that you see on the left-hand side of your screen, okay? So that form is sent to the federal government, it is sent to the state of New Jersey, and it is sent to every college and university that you indicate on that FAFSA, okay? Now, what are those entities doing? They are evaluating you for grants, scholarships, student loans, and employment opportunities. So that one form is doing it all, okay? Now I'm gonna go over two other forms that, certain people have to complete, but everybody's gonna have to complete that free application for federal student aid, and that one form will be sent to every entity that you see on the left, and you will be evaluated for every type of financial aid that you see on the right. Now, the only one that information does not go to is if you're applying for outside scholarships. If you're applying for outside private scholarships, no financial data goes to them. But the reason we mention those in this presentation is because some of those entities may ask for your financial aid information. So when a student completes the FAFSA, they're going to receive, it takes about 2 or 3 days for the FAFSA to be processed. They're going to receive the results of that FAFSA in the email that they use to complete the FAFSA. So that's actually a good way to check to make sure you don't have any errors, make sure that you put the right colleges in there. It kind of serves as your receipt, okay? Some outside scholarship organizations sometimes want those results, so it'll require the student to actually take that extra step to share that information with the scholarship entity, okay? But again, automatically sent to federal, state, colleges, universities, and you'll be evaluated for all types of aid. Now I'm going to go over different types of aid in the next few slides. So you're going to notice that there's need-based aid, which is based on, income, household size, number in college, assets, things like that. Merit-based, obviously based on, high school, grades, AP classes, SAT scores, things like that. And then you're going to find some programs that are a combination of both need and merit. So first programs I'm going to go over are some of the federal programs. These are all need-based grants. So again, the FAFSA will evaluate you for eligibility for these programs. The signature program for the federal government is called the Federal Pell Grant. The awards range anywhere from about $600 per year to as high as $6,495 per year. And these amounts are expected to go up for next year. Traditionally, they go up, maybe $100, $200 every year. Next program is called FSEOG, Federal Supplemental Educational Opportunity Grant. And those are federal funds that are given to all institutions. And then the institutions, based on those FAFSA results, determine whether the student would qualify for that funding. Again, awards up to $4,000. I think some schools give a minimum of about $200 a year to as high as $4,000. Federal government also has this standalone grant called a Teach Grant. So if any students are interested in becoming teachers, they can actually reach out to the school. That FAFSA is a requirement, and then the school can determine if the student not only meets the major component, but also the need component on the FAFSA to qualify for the Teach Grant. And finally, federal work study. Those are jobs on campus. So FAFSA is required for that. And basically the way those works are a school gives a student a certain amount of money in their financial aid package, and then it allows the student priority to apply and perhaps get jobs on campus. And then, they receive a paycheck like every other job. And then that paycheck is to assist them with any educational expenses that they have. So those are some of the federal programs. Again, almost all these programs, all the federal programs are need-based programs. State aid programs. Now, the state of New Jersey has many more programs than the federal government in terms of when you apply for financial aid. And their list includes need and merit-based awards. So you'll have some that are need only, some that are need and merit, and then some that are merit only, okay? And you see there, you have here on the left, a list of some of the programs that the state sponsors, annual awards on the right, or if there's no annual awards, you'll see there, like, for example, the Community College Opportunity Grant. That grant would cover tuition and approved fees. So there's no award because it depends on the community college that you go to, but you would receive full tuition and approved fees. Garden State Guarantee will start in the 22-23 year. That's still being decided how that's going to work, so I don't want to talk too much about that. But you see there's a list there of about, I believe, about 10 different award amounts. Now, I'm not going to go over each programs specifically. Okay, I just want you to know that these programs are out there, but you will have slides in the presentation that cover each one of these programs, and it'll tell you whether it's a need-based award, and you'll have all of the qualifications, that you need in order to meet eligibility for that. Okay, so again, each one of these is explained in a slide for each one of the programs that I indicated. And again, you see, need-based, but then you see that Governor's Urban is need and merit-based because there's a ranking element, and then there's also an eligibility index. That eligibility index is determined by the state, but I could tell you traditionally that 10,500 index is probably household incomes under $250,000 a year. So you see, that's where that combination of the need and the merit comes into play. NJ STARS is solely merit-based. Graduating top 15%, and then there's certain criteria that you must meet. You go to community college for free, and then you can transfer to a four-year school and receive a fixed amount. Okay, so, and the NJ STARS, again, the second part has a merit, a need component, but you see each program has their own slide. It explains the eligibility criteria. It depends whether it's need based or both or merit based. Okay. So again, in the interest of time, that's I'm assigning you homework already. You see, you're on the first couple of slides, and I'm already giving you homework for you to go over. Okay. Student loans. More and more and more student loans have become a necessity. Okay, because we know college is so expensive. All right. So the first loan I want to cover are student loans that are in the student's name only. Okay. So this is a loan that, by the student completing the FAFSA, they will automatically qualify for this loan. Again, regardless of income, you can make $1 million a year. The student, by just completing the FAFSA, will qualify for this type of loan. This is a loan that is, there's no credit check on it, okay? The interest rate is adjustable every year, but right now, for this year, it's at 3.73. We anticipate it's kind of been staying relatively flat the last few years. So hopefully I don't anticipate any spikes next year. And repayment on this loan does not begin until 6 months after the student graduates college. Okay. The only downside, if there was a downside, is when you're looking there through those grade levels, and then dependent on the graduate student, which is probably what most of the students listening to this presentation right now are going to fall under, you see that the amounts are low. Okay. So they're really meant to be just a help or an assistance towards the full college cost. Okay, so it's kind of like the student will have some skin in the game, or will be able to help out, mom and dad in meeting that cost of education. But you see, the amounts are low. $5,500 first year, $6,500, and then $7,500 for junior, seniors, and beyond. And then also you see that there's like a little difference there that says max $3,500 subsidized, because basically this loan has two components, okay? And the school is going to determine which component, if not both, the student qualifies for, and again, based on those FAFSA results. So what happens is the school receives the FAFSA, the student will automatically be eligible for the loan, but then the school is going to determine whether the student receives a subsidized loan, a subsidized or an unsubsidized loan, or an unsubsidized only, okay? And what I mean by that is, on both a subsidized and an unsubsidized loan, the principal is deferred while the student is in school. So again, repayment doesn't begin until 6 months after the student graduates. The subsidized portion, the federal government is paying for the interest on that loan while the student is in school, all right? The unsubsidized portion means that interest comes due immediately. The student can make quarterly payments on simple interest on that loan while they're in school, or they can also capitalize that interest, okay? So again, the FAFSA results and the school will determine which one, if not both, the student may qualify for. And again, these are loans that you have to take. The student could say, well, I'm going to take one. I'm only going to take the subsidized one if I qualify for that. Or I don't need $5,500. I only need $2,000. Well, so be it. Those are all things that are going to be part of the financial aid package, and we'll talk about that in the third section, okay? The next slide is now loans that are for students and parents. So this is where we get the parents involved, okay? And again, all we're doing is presenting options of the many options that are going to be available to you that you're going to apply for and that you potentially could be eligible for. So the first loan program I'm going to point out is called the New Jersey State NJ Class Supplemental Program. Okay, that is a loan program that is for New Jersey residents, and it's for New Jersey residents that could be attending a New Jersey school or they could be attending out of state. So there's no limitation there as long as they're a New Jersey resident. It could be a loan in the student's name. It could be a loan in the parent's name. Okay. But now keep in mind that these loan options that I'm presenting on this slide are credit-based options. Okay, so traditionally what happens is the student applies, they don't have credit and they are denied, and then the entity will come back and say, you need a cosigner. Okay, or in some cases, I have many parents who say, I will let my son and daughter borrow on that automatic federal loan that they qualify for, and then I will borrow any additional loans if he or she needs them for schooling. So the first program you see there again, the state program, very flexible in terms of their repayment options and in terms of, the amount of time you have to repay and in terms of their interest rates. I mean, this loan program, you could take out the money and you can begin to repay it back immediately. You can pay only the interest while the student is in school if, cash flow is an issue, or you can even defer the entire loan until the student graduates from school. At the same time, you can also pick from, as you're picking from either repayment or interest or whatever, you can pick, well, am I going to do a 10-year fixed rate loan? Am I going to do a 15-year fixed rate loan? Am I going to do a 20-year fixed rate loan? Again, these are all things that, as you determine how much you're going to have to pay, how much you're willing to borrow, things like that, you can kind of start that budgeting or that planning process after you receive your award letters and determine which option is best for you. A second option is, but this is only a parent-only option. It's called Federal Plus Loan Program, and that stands for Parent Loan for Undergraduate Student. Now, this is a federal loan that only the parent can borrow. Student is not involved here, okay? On this one, you see that, the conditions or the options are much more limited, On that one, repayment begins immediately. You cannot defer that one. You cannot pay interest only. It begins immediately on the full principal and interest. And the repayment, they give you up to 25 years to repay. Now, if you repay it earlier, good for you. There's no penalty for that, but you have up to 25 years. Again, as opposed to the New Jersey one where you can take 10, 15, 20 years, whatever option you want to go for. All right. Third option is, again, now we got parents and students again. Just private educational loans. Most lenders, most banks lend money for students to go to college, okay? The reason we mention them is because you may have a relationship with your bank, whether it's Sallie Mae or Wells Fargo or PNC or TD Bank or Bank of America, whatever. You may have a relationship with a bank. You may have your mortgage. You may have your small business with them. You may have, investments with them, whatever. And we always recommend, go to those entities. If you have a relationship, ask, do you give student loans out? What are your repayment rates? The interest rates, can I repay? How many years do I have to pay back? Things like that. Ask those questions, because sometimes we have found that private educational entities may be able to beat the federal loan program or even the state loan program when it comes to either interest rates or repayment, or maybe they have a lower credit score. If your credit score is taking a hit, after a few years, you're like, well, they have a lower credit score, so I can qualify for that loan as opposed to qualifying for either the federal or the state product, okay? So again, we mentioned them. These are all options that you can take advantage of if you need to borrow to fund your son and daughter's college education. And basically we are presenting them to you, or this is presented to you so you know that you have options and that you shop around, that smart consumer bit. So definitely shop around. And you'll also find, and you see that note there on the bottom, that these loans allow you to borrow up to the full year cost of attendance. So if it costs $40,000 a year for your son and daughter to study, at a college or university, and you need to borrow 40 and your credit can handle it and you're willing to do that, you could borrow up to that amount. Okay, so also keep that in mind that there's no limit like that other federal loan program that I pointed out before.
Well, we had a question, I'll throw it in at that point. Can a 529 be used to pay back federal loans?
You know what? That's a very good question. I am not sure if you can. I would definitely talk to your plan administrator. You know, what I would probably, recommend in that case is, perhaps take obviously a lower loan and use the 529 to pay your tuition bill, because for sure it can, handle those costs. But in terms of a student loan, I would definitely say ask your plan administrator. My gut instinct is to say yes, but I don't want to give a wrong answer. So definitely check with the plan administrator. Okay. Last but not least is merit or talent based. Now, merit or talent based award or merit or talent based financial aid technically is not part of financial aid. It's not part of the application that you're going to complete, and the financial aid office is technically not involved in this part, but it is part of financial aid in terms of like we're married to admission. So I'll tell you what I mean by that. So usually merit or talent-based aid comes out of the admissions office. All right. As students are applying to the different schools, obviously we know they have to submit transcripts and essays and perhaps SAT scores, and transcripts are going to show AP courses, or the academic track they were in, or if they went to a science high school, obviously that's going to be part of the transcript. So it's going to show a lot of things about them. And as the admissions officers are making their decisions as to whether that student is admissible and whether they're going to admit that student, at the same time, they are evaluating the student for perhaps any institutional merit-based scholarships. Okay, so traditionally, a student who is given or awarded a merit-based scholarship from the institution will receive that notification either with their admissions acceptance or immediately after. Okay, so technically it's not part of the financial aid package yet. Okay, but then traditionally where the two come together is, so I'll explain to you how it works at TCNJ, and at a lot of schools it's very similar. So at TCNJ, my admissions office makes those merit-based decisions or talent-based decisions. For example, the ensemble is looking for an oboe player, and they really need one, and the oboe players have tried out, and this one really stands out, and they want to offer him or her a really good merit package because they want to lock that oboe player into the band. All right, so example, it's real example here from here. So they're making those decisions, they will award the student, but then when they make those decisions and they send those lists of the merit-based or talent-based awards to us in the financial aid office, then we have our own institutional need-based scholarships that we award based on those FAFSA results. And we'll look up the student, and the first thing we do is we'll say, look, did the student file a FAFSA? If they did not, then our evaluation stops there for any additional or potential additional institutional need-based aid. If the student did file a FAFSA, then we have our own eligibility criteria based on that family contribution or the results of the FAFSA. And the student, if the student is eligible for any need-based institutional aid, then we will join that with the institutional merit-based aid. Okay, so it'll be combined and it'll be part of their financial aid package along with perhaps any other aid that the student receives. So again, even though this is being done, the merit or talent base is being done by another office, eventually that information is fed to the financial aid office and it becomes part of their financial aid package. It's just that we don't have, we don't have the decision-making authority when it comes to the merit or talent-based awards. But that's how the two work together. Okay, so section 2, the applications. So I'm going to go over 3 applications. 2 of them are, rarely used or you will not have to complete, and then the FAFSA is the one that everybody does. And I'm kind of giving you a screenshot of what each application looks like with their website. Okay, so the first one I'm going to go over is called the New Jersey Alternative Financial Aid Application. Okay, so undocumented students are not eligible to apply for federal financial aid. Okay, you must be under a valid permanent status to apply for financial aid and fill out the FAFSA. All right, a lot of institutions also have the requirement that a student must be documented, must be a U.S. citizen or eligible non-citizen in order to get institutional aid. But the state of New Jersey is one of the few states in the nation that allows undocumented students to apply for state financial aid only. So they have their own application for undocumented students. So undocumented students, if they meet certain criteria, which is listed here, can actually go to the HVCHS.org website, complete that application, and they will be evaluated for certain types of state aid. So there's only 3 programs that they could apply for and perhaps qualify for, okay? But understand that if there's any undocumented students listening to this application, that although the aid options may be limited, at least you do have aid options available to you through the state of New Jersey. So that's the New Jersey alternative application, and it is for undocumented students only. The next one is called the CSS Profile, okay? So in New Jersey, the only school that requires the CSS Profile is Stevens Institute of Technology, okay? So if your sons and daughters are going to study in New Jersey, the likelihood is that they will not have to complete the CSS Profile. This is more for those students who are thinking of going out of state, okay? Because there are 400 colleges and organizations that use the profile, and basically the profile is used to determine how schools will award their institutional funds only. So traditionally, it's schools that have large institutional funds or give large institutional awards. They want to make sure that they collect more data about the family than the FAFSA does, okay? And you can actually go to that website that you have on the slide there and look up through the college board, the schools that participate. You can also go to the individual colleges and see if they require the profile as part of their financial aid application, okay? Now, the profile is available now. So the profile, like the FAFSA, is available October 1st of each year. So keep in mind that the FAFSA that you are completing now will be for the 2022-2023 academic year, okay? So it's for the seniors in the room, juniors, sophomores. If you're out there listening, it's too early for you, you cannot apply. It's for the seniors in the room, and it is for the academic year that starts September of 2022, okay? It aligns with the FAFSA's use of what's called prior year income. So for the 22-23 academic year, students will be using their 2020, and parents will be using their 2020 income, okay? The profile costs money. So unlike the FAFSA that is free, the profile costs money. It's $25 to apply for in one college, and then each additional college is $16, okay? And what the profile does is it collects more data about the family's income, assets, household information, things like that. So I'll give you some examples. So the profile may ask you about your home value. If you have, when did you buy your house? How much do you owe on it? The region that you live in, they may say, well, we anticipate your house is worth $700,000. You owe $300,000, so you have $400 in equity. And it's because that individual institution may expect the family to borrow on their home equity before, or on a portion of home equity before that school gives the student any institutional funding, okay? The FAFSA also asks no information about your retirement, how much it's worth, what type of retirement, 401ks, 403bs, pension, it doesn't care. That's not listed. Their profile does. The profile wants to know if you have a retirement and what the value of that retirement is. And basically what they're looking for there is if you're contributing the maximum, per year, they may say, well, we expect you to contribute a little less towards retirement and use some of that funding to pay for college. Also, the FAFSA for divorced or separated parents, the FAFSA only asks for custodial parent information. Whoever the custodial parent is on that divorce decree, that's whose information goes on the FAFSA. But the profile may require that not only do you do one profile for your custodial parent, but then your non-custodial parent will have to complete a non-custodial parent profile, okay? So the FAFSA only requires one for your custodial parent. The profile, depending on the school, may require one for your custodial parent and one for your non-custodial parent. So keep that in mind. And again, I've given you here the contact information for the profile. So if you have any questions about the profile, you're unsure, you don't know, hey, my parents are divorced or they're separated, whatever, I'm not sure what to do, call them up, You know, they have a live chat available. You can do, the help at the email, so don't be afraid to reach out to them. Okay.
We have a couple questions on that point. I think the first one you just answered, but I'll read it directly so you can make sure. If students live in multiple households, does each custodial parent need to file a FAFSA profile and/or CSS? Or is there only one profile for the parent whom the child is most financially dependent on?
Yeah, so for the FAFSA, it's only one application for the child who, technically it's the custodial parent or the child who I would say the most financially dependent on. For the profile, it could vary. For the profile, you will definitely need to do one for your custodial parent, but that school may also require that you do one for your non-custodial parent. So FAFSA, one application, profile may require 2 applications.
And then another question just came in, if step parents are at all involved in the process of, or would need to fill out a profile or anything.
Absolutely. So step parents are involved not only in the profile, but also on the FAFSA. If a custodial parent has remarried and lives in the household, the FAFSA and the profile consider that a resource coming into the household and therefore require that that income is also reported on the forms, and that'll be used towards making a determination of eligibility for aid. Okay.
Thank you. Perfect.
But this is the application that everyone will have to complete. So we know certain individuals will have to complete the FAFSA and the profile depending on the school. We know that if you're undocumented, you can only do the undocumented state form. But this is the application that everyone will have to complete in order to be considered for aid.
Will, can I throw in, I'm sorry, can I throw in one more question on the previous?
Absolutely.
If you have 2 children in college simultaneously,
Mhm.
are they separate or are they together for FAFSA and CSS?
Yeah, so what happens when you have, remember, it's the student who is applying for financial aid. So each student has to do their own FAFSA. It's just that the student will provide their parents' information on the FAFSA. So let's say, Dan, me and you were brothers, I would do my FAFSA, you would do yours, but mom and dad's information would go on both of our FAFSAs, okay? So that's how it works.
And then one last one on the federal loan piece. If the federal government forgives loans, is there a specific type of loan that would be forgiven?
The federal loan programs only, okay? So that Parent Plus or that subsidized or unsubsidized Stafford or federal direct loan, the one that's under the student's name. Okay.
Great, thank you.
Perfect. So we're here at the FAFSA. I've given you the FAFSA website there where you could go and apply. Keep in mind that, so when you go to the FAFSA website now, what's going to happen is you're going to go in and create an account, and then you're going to be faced with 2 options. Okay. There's going to be a 2021, 2022 FAFSA sitting there. That's not the one you want to complete, because that's the one for current students, any students who are applying this year. So, people who were seniors last year. You want to complete the 2022, 2023 FAFSA. So just keep that in mind, because sometimes we get students who get confused and they end up doing the wrong year's FAFSA. And then we receive it and we're like, we can't determine eligibility for next year. You're not even a student here yet. You fill out the wrong year. So real basic, just keep that in mind, okay? But the 22-23 FAFSA is available now. Again, it's available October 1 of each year. And you have to fill out a FAFSA every year if you want to be reevaluated for aid. So keep that in mind. And again, it's the student who is applying for aid. So the FAFSA uses what's called prior year income information. So it'll be using your 2020 tax return infos, which have long been submitted, okay? You also have the option on the FAFSA to link to the IRS website and have all your income information imported into the FAFSA. We recommend this if you can do this, because it's obviously going to have the most accurate data. But if you don't want to use it or you can't link in or whatever, you can also just pull out your tax returns from 2020 and you can go by and fill out, the FAFSA, looking at the lines, it'll give you instructions. This is found on this line, and you can put the dollar amount there and move forward. But obviously, if you can connect to the IRS, that's the best. The only 2 exceptions, again, if you can't connect to the IRS, is folks who do married filing separately. If you did an amended tax return or a foreign tax return, those cannot be link to the IRS. And the last bullet on this page, which is probably the most important one, is you can apply and submit the FAFSA prior to your earliest school deadlines, and you're allowed to do 10 schools per submission. So what I always recommend is, so the FAFSA allows you to do 10 schools per submission, okay? And right now, your sons and daughters may be like, well, I'm not sure which schools. There's some schools I haven't looked at. I don't know if I want to put them on the FAFSA. I would still recommend you complete the FAFSA. You get it kind of like in the pipeline, and you make sure you've met your earliest deadline, okay? The FAFSA takes about 48 to 72 hours to process. And at the end of that processing, the student is going to be notified via email, okay? So as your sons and daughters are going and visiting more schools or making decisions, or perhaps a new school pops up, you can go back into that saved FAFSA and go in and add schools. It gives you that option. And you can do that 100 times. Put 100, schools on the FAFSA. It's just that it allows you only to do 10 at a time. So you have to do the 10, submit it, wait till it's processed, go back into the saved FAFSA, delete those 10, put 10 new ones, resubmit it. The original 10 are in the queue, and now you're adding new ones, okay? So again, the goal here is you want to submit your FAFSA as early as possible, okay, to make sure you've met every deadline. And don't be worried if your school's not on there on that first submission, because your goal is just to submit it, and then you can add the schools later as they become available. If you're unsure of any school at this point, what I would probably recommend is put your local community college, as the one school. So at least you get that FAFSA in, that data will be available to them. Trust me, they're not going to do anything with the data, because we're going to cover that in the third section. But at least you got the FAFSA in, okay? And then you can go back in and add schools later on. What does the FAFSA do? So the FAFSA collects the family's personal and financial information, and that information is used to calculate what's called the expected family contribution. They have a federal formula, they throw it through that data through the formula, and it comes out with an expected family contribution. And you're going to see that term again in the third section. You do the FAFSA electronically. It is the recommended method. You would go to studentaid.gov. If you want to do it by paper, you can. You can request a paper copy from the federal government. Just keep in mind the paper copy takes 6 to 8 weeks to process. The electronic one takes 2 to 3 days, okay? Also, the student, remember, the student is the one who is applying, but the student and at least one parent in the household must create what's called a federal student aid ID, or an FSA ID at fsaid.ed.gov. And that is basically your electronic signature, okay? It's a PIN, all right? So the student's gonna get a PIN, and the parent is going to get a PIN. When they're done with the FAFSA, they will need that PIN as an electronic signature. They put that PIN in and they send it in. All right. FAFSA can be done via smartphone, on the Student Aid app, and highly recommend you do this. So for example, FSA ID is probably the area where most people need some assistance with. Okay. There's this great tool called YouTube. I love it. You can go out to YouTube. I've given you a link there, and it's about a 3-minute video on how to create an FSA ID. But there are a ton of videos, and the Federal Student Aid has their own website, their own YouTube channel where you can go out. But how to create an FSA ID, how to fill out a FAFSA, about federal aid, if you're going to do loans, how to manage them, there's like even a loan simulator tool. So it has a lot of really good videos for you. Most of them are short. There's even a video on, it's like an hour and something video on how to complete the FAFSA. It literally a step-by-step on how to complete the FAFSA, okay? So not only am I going to give you numbers at the very end that you could call and contact, the state if you ever got stuck, but you can also go to YouTube. You can go to the Federal Student Aid Programs, which the FAFSA, when you go in there, has their 800 number. And if you ever get stuck and you have any issues, you always will have a source out there to be able to assist you, okay? But definitely recommend the YouTube channel part. General FAFSA information. So I mentioned this, but I don't mention it to scare you. I mention it to put you at ease, okay? Even though at first it scares you. There are 106 questions on the FAFSA, all right? And according to the feds, it takes a dependent student 63 minutes on average to fill out a new form, and then 41 minutes for the renewal. what I'm trying to tell you here is that when you're ready to fill out your FAFSA, be patient, take your time, collect all your documents. The student should be the one completing it with mom and dad helping them, okay? And take your time on the first try. You know, second year, you'll get quicker and better, and you'll be able to do a renewal one. So a lot of information will be pre-populated. But also, again, don't be afraid of the number of questions, because what you're going to find is that 80% of the questions on the FAFSA are all biographic or demographic info. You know, your name, your middle initial, your last name, your address, you know, city, state, social security, date of birth. If you have a driver's license, what state, you know, like a high school you want to attend, your citizenship status. So, you know, you start looking, you're like, boom, there's a lot of questions, but the questions are really easy. You know, most of them you're going to be able to get through, you know, literally probably like in seconds. You know, what's your citizenship? Hey, I'm a US citizen. Boom, click that radial, you move on. Okay. So again, it is a lot of questions. Take your time, be patient, but most of the questions are easy. So you should be able to get through them, you know, relatively easily. Okay. But again, if you have any issues, you're going to have those numbers, you have those YouTube channels to be able to assist. You have the guidance office, you know, so the help is out there.
We had a couple of questions I'm going to throw out at this point, if you don't
Sure.
mind. One was a couple of like technical points. Can parents use the same PIN for all of their children in college?
Absolutely. Yes. Remember, it's an electronic signature. So just like you would sign John Smith on every form, that same PIN can be used.
And then do you have to include information about foreign assets in the FAFSA and CSS?
You know what? On the CSS, it'll depend on the school. And on the FAFSA, it will probably give you instructions on what type of foreign assets. So just make sure that when you hit the asset part of the FAFSA, what you're going to notice on the FAFSA, if you haven't done it already, is after each question, there's like a little question mark next to it. And you can actually click on that question mark and it'll open up a new window and it'll give you more details as to what should be reported there. So you can, you know, at that point, you know, when you hit the assets, you can click and it'll tell you what foreign assets, if any, you have to list.
Okay. Next, will the student and parent have separate IDs?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Just like, you know, the student signs his own signature, the parent has to sign their own signature. Absolutely.
If neither parent is listed as the custodial parent, joint/equal custody, which one completes the FAFSA?
The one who had the most income.
Okay, perfect. And can you fill out the form little by little? In other words, does it save your progress?
Absolutely. It's like, I believe it's like 6 sections, and you can do one section and it'll automatically save it and exit out and then come back later. I mean, and then once you do everything and submit it, it's always going to be there. So, you know, if God forbid the student made a mistake, they can always go back in and go to that section and just fix the error and resubmit it.
And then somebody had asked if you could post the YouTube link again.
It's on the presentation.
Oh, yeah, I was going to say, I'll be sending this presentation out afterwards too. I believe you gave permission to do that. So
Absolutely.
you know, we'll send all the information out. You don't have to worry about jotting everything down tonight. We'll get you everything for posterity.
And I'll show you this again. I mean, if you actually just go to the search bar on YouTube and you put how to create an FSA ID, boom, it'll go right to this. Okay. So it's a wonderful thing called search in Google.
And then one more question on the financial reporting. It says, I thought it asked for checking, et cetera, balances as of that day. What day, the first day you start or the last day you complete the form, if you're doing
As
it?
of the, most people complete the form and submit it the same day. You know? So, I mean, you know, let's say you form today and submitted it on Tuesday.
Yeah, Will, we're losing you a little bit, Will. You're frozen at the. Oh, you're back now, I believe.
Okay, yeah, I saw like a little thing said
Okay.
internet connection unstable. So I'm good now.
Yeah, I see you now.
Perfect.
I'll wave or something I'll let you know if you freeze up.
That's perfect. Yeah. So yes, in terms of the cash savings, technically it's as of the date you file it, you submit the FAFSA. Okay. But again, most people start the FAFSA and submit it that same the next day. You know, so unless it's taking you like 2 months to submit it, where there's going to be that much of a difference in your cash and savings, then, you know, I could see where that's going to be a difference. But the difference is going to be negligible if you started on Sunday and you submitted it the following Thursday, so.
Yep.
And we're good?
Yep, we're clear now. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. So just some general eligibility requirements. Again, the student must have a valid social security number, and an eligible program of study, and pursuing a degree, certificate, or other recognized credential. And basically what we mean here is, in order to get financial aid, they want to see that you have been admitted to a school and that you are pursuing some kind of credential, okay? Even if you are admitted and you're undeclared, but eventually you're going to be an accountant or you're going to declare engineering or whatever, they just want to know that you are serious about pursuing, that credential, and you will, at some point get it, okay? If you're non-matriculated, if you're just taking random classes, you will not be eligible for financial aid. Again, must be U.S. citizen or eligible non-citizen, and males must be registered with selective service. So although this requirement was waived for 21-22 because of COVID, males over the age of 18 in the United States are required with the selective service system. Basically, it gives the U.S. government a pool of names to select from in case there's a national emergency, i.e. the draft. There hasn't been a draft since 1975, so don't worry, okay? And in order to receive any federal program, men must be registered in selective service, okay? There is talk about either continuing a waiver or eliminating it in general, but right now it was only waived for this year. We'll see what happens. And if you have a 17-year-old senior, when they're completing the FAFSA, they can actually indicate registering FAFSA, and it'll be done for them automatically when they turn 18. Again, components of the FAFSA, remember 106 questions that you see here, demographic information, student income and assets if they had any. There's going to be a series of questions that are going to ask the student whether they're, depending on how the student answers, whether they're considered dependent and have to provide parental data or independent and provide their own. There's a lot of questions about parent demographic info, social security numbers, last name, birth. They're even going to ask if your parents attended college, how long, things like the fact just collects a lot of data. The more important components, the household size, the number in college, again, those parent income and assets, anybody in the family is on a federal means tested benefit. That's an important part of the formula. So it treats you differently on that federal, again, just all the general FAFSA asks. And again, we reiterate that, list all your colleges of interest, and you can do up to 10 per submission. Complete the FAFSA, you're going to receive a screenshot like this. Until you get this one, you're not done with FAFSA. It's going to have a confirmation number you see here on the top that is unique to you. There's also a number that is unique to you. There's going to be the expected family contribution, which again, we're going to, in the next section. It even gives you kind of like an eligibility in terms of a Pell Grant student may qualify for. So, some people decide to print this page. I'm kind of a little big on paper, in terms of printing the receipt, but you will receive this information, via email as well. Okay, so this is just basically your confirmation. It shows you that you have submitted your FAFSA, which is a great thing. Additional, oh, you're on mute, Dan.
Yeah.
Okay.
Couple questions I was going to toss out at this point. One was to confirm the 2020 INRS tax info will automatically be retrieved when filling out that section that you were just going through.
If you are able to link to the IRS website, then yes, it will automatically be populated.
And can you negotiate with the school if you feel the EFC is too high?
You can never negotiate on the EFC. That's non-negotiable. It's a federal formula. And traditionally this is a question that we would cover on the aid packages, but traditionally I would say if you, have a question about your aid package, or you feel, why did you, get less, or should you have gotten more? Traditionally, I would say it's broken up into two sections, okay, that you would reach out to. Obviously, any merit-based funding, you would ask the admissions office. Again, they're the ones who make the decisions about merit or test-based. You would reach out to them and you would say, look, my son or my daughter received this. We would like to know, how was that decision made? What was it based on? And sometimes it's legit. What happens is, let's say, The admissions office got a final transcript, which had, a higher rank, let's say, or the admissions office got a transcript that did not rank, and that was one of the components they were looking at in terms of their merit award. And they said, well, your son and daughter only qualified for the middle of the road award because we didn't have the rank, and the top end award requires that they're in the top 10% or something. So sometimes that's legit. So any merit talent-based admissions, any of the need-based aid can reach out to the financial aid office. But traditionally, I would tell you, unless you have anything new to add, like in other words, you're like, hey, look, even though I did the FAFSA, I've lost my job, or this has now happened. There's been a change, from what was reported on the FAFSA. Then pretty much the aid office is going to be like, hey, look, we're going to put out our best offer out there at the get-go. This is not, let's make a deal. It's not negotiable. And then, we're pretty much left at that. So again, unless anything new to add to the conversation or something different or something they may not know about, then that's the only time I would say then you can reach out to the aid office in terms of the need-based side.
And then one final one, just looking for clarity on that selective service piece. It says, do you mean the students don't need to register for selective service this year as seniors? Or they just click register?
Yeah, so in other words, if you are currently a senior, you have to register. It was only those that were seniors last year and are now freshmen that they waived it for. And it was under the guise of COVID, so it was waived. We didn't have to collect it, but right now it stands the guidance is that for next year they will have to.
Great, thank you.
Okay. So additional documents. So obviously, as I mentioned at that third slide, or at the very beginning, that information, that FAFSA data is going to the federal, the state, the institution. If for some reason those entities need more information from the student, they will reach out to them. Okay. But here's kind of like how it works. So the federal government lets the school act on their behalf. So if the federal government, the federal processor, needs additional information from the student, let's say the FAFSA got rejected, or let's say, more information is needed, something was incorrect, asset data is incorrect, whatever, they're gonna let the school know, and then the school's gonna reach out to the student. Okay, so the school, traditionally what we do is we will send the student a hard copy letter during their admissions cycle if we need anything else. And then after they become our student, they've paid their deposit and are officially matriculated, then we will turn over to email, okay? But some schools will just send the student an email, or they'll send a message to their school portal once they're admitted, and they'll say, hey, look, federal government is asking us for the following information. Please submit it as soon as you can. Also, if the school needs any information for their processing purposes, they will reach out usually via the same communication, okay? Hey, the office needs the following in order to be able to process your aid award, or you're still missing this, or we need a document to audit this, whatever. So the federal government and the school we consider that one entity, and then we will reach out to the student if we need additional data. But the state of New Jersey works differently. Remember, this data is also going to the state of New Jersey, to the Higher Education Student Assistance Authority, and they're processing the aid eligibility on their own for the student, and then they notify the school. If the state needs something from the student in order to be able to process that aid, or they need more documentation in order to be able to audit or do something, they will reach out to the student directly at the email that the student used on their FAFSA. Okay, so keep that in mind. So usually I would tell students at this point that the email you use on the FAFSA should not be your school email. Okay, because once you graduate from school, that email is no longer going to be valid. You really should be using your personal email, or create an email, for this. So you definitely want to make sure that you have an email that you're going to monitor after you graduate from high school. And during this time of year, I would say you should be monitoring your emails very frequently, not only for information from the schools for admissions, but also from the financial aid offices and the state and things like that once you do your FAFSA, okay? So again, federal government and school, one notification directly from the school. State of New Jersey will reach out to the student individually via their email if they need more information, okay? So the aid awards. So a quick summary here. So we know the first section is, hey, look, there's these different types of aid. You're going to fill out the forms. It's going to be sent to all these entities, and you're going to be evaluated for all the aid that's out there. Okay, federal, state, institutional. Section 2, we know that there could be multiple forms, depending on your individual situation. Undocumented that have their own form, everybody completes the FAFSA, and then some institutions require that additional CSS profile, okay? So all of that is basically for the aid award, for this section, okay? How the school is going to package you and how they notify the student as to what type of aid they're eligible for and how much they qualify for, okay? So there are certain steps that each college and university kind of takes in the background before they prepare an aid package for a student. So again, this is just more for informational purposes here. You're not involved in any of this, but it's just so you understand why you may submit your FAFSA data and put 100 schools on your FAFSA, but only the schools that the student is accepted to are going to prepare an aid package for the student, because there is a lot of work that goes on in the background in order to prepare that aid package, okay? So step 1 is the school is going to establish what's called a cost of attendance, COA, okay? You're going to see this again, okay? And what we traditionally do is the cost of attendance is established on a yearly basis, and we look at all the costs that that student would incur if they attended our school, okay? Here's just some of the common areas that we look at, obviously tuition and fees, room and board, if the student's going to live on campus, books, supplies, equipment, transportation to and from campus, loan fees if the student is going to borrow, if the student is doing a junior year abroad, then, during their junior year, that will be also added to their cost of attendance. So it's basically we're creating a budget for that student. How much does it cost for that student to come to our school for one academic year? The next step is we pull in the FAFSA data. We pull in that FAFSA data. It's gone through the federal formula. Perhaps the institution may have their own institutional methodology or formula. And we are looking for that results or that expected family contribution from the FAFSA. That is the index that we use in order to determine if the student qualifies for aid and for how much and what types, okay? So the first one is the budget. The next is the FAFSA results. So I'm going to give you a sample EFC for the Smith family. Okay, so the Smith family, they live in New Jersey. The parents are married. They have a household size of 4, and their first child is going to college. Their 2020 adjusted gross income was $120,000 a year, and their assets are $15,000, and the student had no income or assets. So the federal government, when they ran this family through their formula and all their FAFSA data, determined that the Smith family can contribute $21,474 towards their son and daughter's first year of education. Okay, so they spit out that EFC, and that's the number that we use. Okay, so then we determine what's called need. That's step 3. Okay, so you see here the various types of institutions up top: county college, state college, university, private college, university. And then you have that COA, remember, cost of attendance. We know community colleges are relatively inexpensive. You are basically paying for tuition and fees and maybe books. So community college, about $6,000 a year. State college, university, this is my sector, $30,000 a year. And this is actually very, very close to what my school costs per year for tuition, fees, room, and board. If you add books to this, you're looking at probably another $1,200 for the year. So very close to what my school costs. State colleges and universities are traditionally around this amount. And then we have the private colleges and universities. You see that that's more expensive. Obviously, they're not a state college, so they're not subsidized by the state. So they're going to be more expensive to attend. Second item is, again, that EFC, that family contribution from the Smith family, and that is the constant. No matter where you attend, what type of institution, the EFC remains the same. And no matter where you attend in the US, the EFC remains the same, okay? So it does not matter. And then finally, we are left with what's called financial need, okay? What's the difference between what the parent or the family can contribute versus what it costs to go to that institution? So you're going to see at the community college that this family, the Smiths, can actually contribute more than it costs to go to community college. So in this case, they have no financial need. which means that the community college has no responsibility to package them with financial aid. Okay, they do not have to give that student aid. If the student wants to apply for a loan, if the student gets a scholarship, whatever, then that's great. The student can receive that. It's just that the institution has no responsibility to find or package that student with financial aid. If you look at the state college university sector, my sector, you see that our goal then is to try and find you enough financial aid to meet that need of $8,526, which means that, hey, that need may come in the form of a student loan if that's one of the options. Okay. Now, let's say your son and daughter is fortunate enough, they come to my school and they are eligible for a $10,000 per year scholarship. We will award that scholarship. But in that situation, that's a great situation because, you know, your financial need was $8,500, but since they qualified for a $10,000 merit scholarship, then that financial need has been met. Plus, you know, it's been met, and then the student even has extra funding to eat into that family's EFC. Okay, so that's a good scenario. And then you see that at the private college university, again, you know, a little higher costs, you know, the EFC remains constant, you know, that need is higher. But keep this in mind, you know, private colleges and universities realize this. So therefore, they have to be more generous with their endowments, with their school funding. If not, nobody could afford to attend a private college university. On my end, my pockets, unfortunately, are not as deep. Even though I am subsidized by the state, the colleges, my pockets are not as deep. I don't have as much money to give out, you know, in merit and need-based institutional funding. So, you know, what you may find, and we get this all the time, you know, that a student applies to a higher expense private institution and their aid package is actually more generous at that school, even though it costs more than a package at my school, you know, and we realize that, and so be it. You know, we'll be the first ones to say, go to that school. They're giving you the best package, but it's just that, you know, your sons and daughters should not be dissuaded from applying to a private school. In other words, if they want to, they should apply if they're really interested, and then see where that financial aid package falls to see if then that's a viable economic option for the family. Okay, so all of that, those steps are, and I see you, Dan, so are for this, and I'll stop right here.
Yeah, just a general question on COA. The cost of attendance goes up every year. Does merit aid ever tend to increase yearly to match tuition increases?
It could, but that's up to the institution. Okay, so let's kind of like get into that a little deeper in terms of the aid awards and all that stuff. Okay, so you saw that, you know, all that stuff, all that prep work going on in the background is basically for this, the award notice. Okay, what is going to be sent to the student? What does the student qualify for? Okay, so I'm presenting you here with kind of like a standard generic award notice that I lifted from the Northern New Mexico College website. Okay, and it's pretty much, I think, what a lot of other schools use. You know, very standard. You'll see, you know, they got how much aid you qualify for and the differences that it's coming for, and then it's got some personal information and then some budgeting information up top. But the bottom line is the format could vary by institution. Okay, different institutions have different packaging strategies. So some institutions may just send you something that looks like it's just their financial aid in general. May not have anything on how much it costs, you know, your family contribution, any of that. They may say you got to go hunt that out for yourself on the website. And some institutions will be very detailed, you know, in how they break everything down. And I'm going to show you a shopping sheet or one of the formats in a couple of slides so you can see one that's really broken down in a lot of detail. Okay. The award notice could be available in hard copy or online. Okay, there are still schools that like to send out a formal financial aid package, you know, and it comes via the postal service and it'll arrive in hard copy, you know, with glossy, you know, books in it and an award letter that you can interpret with instructions. You may get that, or you may do what we do. What we do is our award summary is online. Okay, our award letter, it's all online. What we do is once the student is admitted, you know, we will send the student an email via their portal, via their admissions portal. We'll tell them log into your admissions portal, follow, you know, the following instructions, and you will be able to view your financial aid awards. Okay. Obviously available after the FAFSA is filed and the student is accepted. Again, I want to mention that Since there's so much work on the background to prepare these award notices, a student will not receive an award notice or a financial aid package, if you want to call it that, until after they have been accepted. Okay, so a school is not going to go through that whole rigmarole of processing a financial aid award if the student has not even been accepted at their school. And obviously the most blatant one is it's used to compare aid packages. Okay, kind of like a Captain Obvious bullet there. Okay, now a couple of things to be aware of, okay, on the award notices. So you should be looking at all the fine print on an award notice, any instructions that come with it. But mainly you're going to be looking for any conditions on institutional aid or scholarships, okay? And this is where kind of like that question, Dan, that you just asked from one of the parents comes in. So for example, is the institute, what conditions is the institution putting on that scholarship? Are they going to tell you that, for example, I'll give you ours, at our institution, when the student receives a merit scholarship, it goes out with their admissions notice, and there will be probably a contract that immediately follows that, okay? And that contract will have all of the requirements to maintain that aid, what GPA you have to keep, what number of credits you have to complete every year, whether the award is fixed, for how many years or how many semesters, okay? So on our end, it's very simple, 3.0 GPA. We want the student to complete 12 credits per semester. We do it by units, and the award is fixed in equal values for each year. But again, one school may say, hey, the award will increase every year according to tuition or by a fixed amount. Another school may say, hey, guess what? We front load our awards, okay? So we may say, hey, look, you're going to get $40,000, but you're going to get $20,000 freshman year, $10,000 sophomore year, and then $5 junior and $5 senior. Okay. So again, you're really looking for what are the conditions for that, and is that award fixed over the 4 years, or is it reevaluated every year? Is every year the student going to have to complete a FAFSA? Is every year the school going to look at their now college GPA and classes and say, hey, you're going to get, in addition to your scholarship, or your scholarship is going to go down, or you didn't qualify this year because, your GPA tanked, your first semester of college, you see? So you're going to be looking for all of the conditions on any of that institutional funding, okay? The second, will outside scholarships impact institutional scholarships, okay? So I'll give you an example. So Johns Hopkins is one of them. So like what Johns Hopkins likes to do is they like to say, okay, we're going to award the student $30,000 per year for 4 years, let's say, all right? But if the student qualifies for any outside scholarship funding, that will be used to offset our $30,000. You see, so in other words, the student can only receive $30,000 in any scholarship funding. If the student gets a $5,000 scholarship from the Coca-Cola Foundation, they're going to take that and they're going to put the $5,000, and now the Johns Hopkins scholarship goes down to $25,000. Okay. At my institution, we will stack the scholarships. So in other words, let's say the student qualifies for a $7,000 merit scholarship, and then $3,000 come in from the College Board, and $2,000 come in from Coca-Cola, and $700 come in from the student's church as a scholarship. We will just stack that on top of our 7, okay? The more that they can receive, the better it is for them. So that's how we will package the student. So again, you got to know, how they're going to treat that institutional scholarship money. And then I kind of spoke a little bit about the front loading. Just beware about the schools that front load their scholarships, okay? Because you may receive an award notice from school A who front loads their scholarships, and then one from school B who does their scholarships in 4 equal installments. And you may say, well, look, school A, man, we can afford this school. The cost outstanding to us is much less. But since you didn't read those conditions on that scholarship, you didn't realize that that scholarship has been front loaded. So you're going to have a bigger gap sophomore year, and then an even bigger gap junior and senior year, as opposed to the school that gave you 10, 10, 10, and 10, which you can then kind of budget yourself as to what's going to happen the next 4 years. What is the difference that I'm going to have to cover? Okay. So keep some of those things in mind. Some additional things to be aware of. does the school package to need? So for example, I know of a lot of schools that what they do is they say, hey, look, going back to that cost of attendance, EFC, and need slide that I showed you at the very beginning, some schools that say, we do not award any merit aid, okay? You could be, a valedictorian, have, AP classes up the wazoo, all this stuff. We do not award any merit-based aid. All we award is need-based aid. So for example, that family that came to my school, if we were that type of school and had that, balance of 8,526, that's all the aid that you would get, okay? Nothing on top of that, all right? That works for some parents, trust me, it's great. But for some other parents who are like, well, I'm not gonna have any need, we just make too much money. I'm hoping that my son gets, merit aid. If that school doesn't award merit aid, then obviously that's not going to be an option for you, okay? So which is like that third bullet, I'm going to jump to that one. Does the school award merit aid or just need-based aid or both? That's something that you will have to find out from the school once you receive the financial aid award notices from that school. Also, does the school package with parent loans? So for example, at TCNJ, we only award students with any aid that they are eligible for, the student, and grants, scholarships, and loans that the student is eligible for. We do not involve the parent in the aid package. But certain schools may say, well, we are packaging with what the student qualifies for, and there will be an expectation, and we expect that that parent will have to borrow $20,000 a year, to fund their sons and daughters' education. So again, when you're looking at that aid package, you want to make sure, look, school A costs $30,000 a year and I'm getting $10,000, but that's aid that my son qualified for only. The parent is not in that picture. School B may cost $30,000 and they're giving you an aid package that for $20,000 or $25,000, you're like, wow, this is a great aid package. I only have a $5,000 difference, but what you don't realize is that school B has put a $20,000 parent loan in there, you see? So even though their package looks more generous, they're expecting the parent to contribute a certain amount, while another school may say, no, we are only expecting the student. We'll let you guys figure out what options you want to take advantage of to meet any difference that's out there, okay? So again, I don't want to make it sound like it's more confusing than it really is. All I want you to do is, as you're getting the aid awards, you're getting the aid packages, just make sure that you pay attention to them. You look through them, look for perhaps any, instructions that are in there. And if you have questions, reach out to the school about them. Okay, go, oh, I just want to make sure I'm reading this. I want to make sure that I understand this correctly. Okay, but some schools will send you a package that looks like this. Okay, it's called a federal shopping sheet or a college financing plan. Okay, so basically this is a standardized award letter. So like some schools are going to send you something that looks like this, okay, which they can tailor to whatever way they want, all right? Some schools will send you something that looks like this, and some schools will send you both, okay? We do both. We send a financial aid award summary, and we also provide the financial aid shopping sheet, okay? What you're going to find is that the shopping sheet or the financing plan is a requirement in New Jersey. So every New Jersey school has to provide this college financing plan or shopping sheet or New Jersey shopping sheet, but they all look like this, okay? They may also send another award notice in conjunction or may only send this one. But if your sons and daughters are studying out of state, it's voluntary at out-of-state schools to use the college financing plan or the shopping sheet, okay? So again, in-state, not an issue. You'll be able to compare apples to apples, everything will be delineated and broken down for you on a standardized format. Going out of state, you may find that some schools use this and some schools use their own format of the award letter, okay? So it's gonna make it a little bit more difficult to kind of compare. You might compare apples to oranges, okay? So just keep that in mind that you may get different formats, but I'll be honest with you, I do like using the shopping sheet. It gives you a nice breakdown here of what the cost of attendance is, broken down by tuition fees, room, board, books, things like that. It alerts the student if they qualify for any scholarships or any grants, which is the free money. It gives them a net cost, Then it goes into perhaps loan options, whether it's student loan options, parent loan options, things like that, private loan options, maybe institutional, and any work study or work options. Okay, so it kind of breaks it down, and it also has, more information, instructions on the back and all that stuff. Okay, so again, it's probably going to be, the second most stressful time. The first one is getting those admissions decisions. The second one is getting the financial aid notices and going, how much is this really going to cost me, and making heads or tails of these notices. Okay. Any questions, Dan?
Yeah, there's one specifically about TCNJ. I think I know the answer, but I don't want to speak out of turn. Does TCNJ offer both merit and need-based aid?
We do.
Yep.
Yes, we do offer both. Absolutely. Okay, so section 4, and this is just basically other information, recommendations, just so you have more information. I know I've overwhelmed you already, so I'm even going to throw more information at you. Okay, but again, you're going to have copies of all this. So the first one is, be proactive. Don't be waiting for things. You should be going out or looking or waiting, to see, oh, when am I going to get my admissions decision? Our admissions decisions, have they gone out? I noticed my friends are receiving them. I haven't received it. I applied at the same time. Then you know what? Maybe it's time to call the school. Call the admissions office. Hey, have you sent out your admissions decisions? Do that. Review those deadlines. Super important. Make sure you've gone out to all the colleges' websites and you reviewed, well, what are the admissions deadlines? What's early decision deadline? What's early action deadline? What's regular admit deadline? You see? What's the financial aid deadline? Make sure I don't miss that. Does the school require that CSS profile as an additional form? Perhaps they have, certain college applications or documents they want you to fill out. So now's the time to do that. October to February is when that is hot. You're doing all those things. Okay, you should be busy from now until December easily. Okay, because then traditionally February through April are when schools are sending out those award letters. They're usually sending out their admissions decisions depending on what cycle you're in, but that's when we're sending out the award letters, okay? So you should be expecting them at that point. I can tell you traditionally we do ours in March. We're hoping to be able to do it a little earlier this year, like maybe end of February. But, if you go out to the school's website, you'll probably be able to find on their homepage, on the financial aid homepage, when the award notices will go out, okay? So be on top of that, because May 1 is decision day. By May 1, you got to pay that deposit to secure your seat. I know some schools are very loosey-goosey with their deposit day. We are not. We meet our class. Students are clamoring to get in. We meet our class, so you make sure you pay that deposit, by May 1st, or else you could lose out on your seat. And traditionally, they want like postmark May 1st, or kind of like your taxes, checks in the mail type of thing. Because June through August, that's when you're doing your fall schedules. That's when the students are going to orientations. If those fall semester bills are going to be due in August, so you want to make sure you have all of your financing in line, all of your financial aid in line, to make sure that your sons and daughters have no issues moving into their dorms come the end of August, beginning of September. Okay, so again, be proactive. All right, special circumstances. Now, if you remember, you're doing a FAFSA now for the 2022-2023 academic year, and you're using 2020 income information. So that's a real broad span of time. So understand that there are conditions where the financial aid office can recalculate your eligibility. Okay, this is where I said if you have new information to present to the aid office, that's when you kind of want to go to them and go, all right, this has happened since I did my FAFSA. What do I do? Or since I filed my tax returns, okay? I'm kind of giving you here the acceptable conditions at most, if not all schools, okay? But this is very much a school by school process. It's done on a case by case basis, and the decisions for the reevaluation could vary by school, okay? So these are the ones at TCNJ, all right? And which are pretty much the standard ones. But I don't know, perhaps another school may say, well, if you pay high school tuition, for another child, we'll look at that in terms of reevaluating aid. You see, what I always recommend is if you know that this process is out there, if you think that you may have a special condition or a special circumstance which qualifies you for a reevaluation, you need to go out to the specific school's website, see what acceptable special circumstances or reevaluation conditions they have, and then see what forms or additional documentation you're going to have to submit to fill to apply for it. Okay. If you went to my website, the financial aid website, on the left-hand side, there's a link that says special circumstances. You can click on it. It opens up a whole new web page with a ton of instructions on what are acceptable circumstances. There's a form for each one of the circumstances, and there are additional documents on each form that you will have to submit for the reevaluation. The only issue here is, and it's a big one, is most schools will not do a reevaluation until you make a commitment to that school. So it's kind of like a catch-22. You're like, well, wait a second. I don't know if I can make a commitment until you've told me if I qualify for a special circumstance or not. But the school's like, you got to make a commitment because it's a very labor-intensive process. There's a lot of personal data that's going to have to be collected from the family. And the school is basically telling you, you need to make a decision whether you can afford to come here based on the situation as is, because we cannot guarantee that the reevaluation or the special circumstance is going to impact the aid package. Okay. So again, a lot there to absorb in this. Just know that the process is out there. It's school specific. You need to go out to the school's website, but it does not guarantee that the reevaluation will make an impact on the aid package. Okay. Other resources, and this is where that special circumstance kind of like ties into this. You have to have a 4-year plan. This is not making it through freshman year and then we'll figure out sophomore, junior, and senior after that. Okay. No, this is a 4-year plan. Okay. As we meet with families in March, in April, as to, hey, look, here's my financial aid packages. I want to see if I can afford to come here. This is one of the things we talk about. Okay. The last thing that we want is for you to just barely be making it freshman year. Ooh, I was able to scrunch enough, or borrow enough, but now I'm maxed out on my credit and I don't know if I can do sophomore year or even junior year or senior year. That's the last thing I want. Somebody to come to me sophomore summer or junior summer and say, Mr. Casaine, I'm maxed out. I can't afford to come here anymore. I don't know what to do. And I'm like, I have no more options for you. You're going to have to drop out. Okay. That's terrible. I don't want to do that. But that means that I'd rather have, or right now my associates do this, they meet with families. They'd rather have the tough conversation with you before you make the decision and go, perhaps you cannot afford to come to TCNJ. This is not a good economic fit for you, than for you to be let down or for you not be able to have your son and daughter graduate from here, because they have to drop out. Okay, that we don't want that. All right. But again, that doesn't mean all is lost. There are other options. Look for outside scholarships. Payment plans are also another option. Campus employment, whether through work study or through student employment in general. The college's student employment budget is about 10 times what my college work study budget is for jobs on campus. Also think about specialized campus opportunities that are available. So any of you who are listening who went to college and lived in a dorm, you probably had a residential advisor on your dorm floor. They were basically the dorm police. Okay. It's not an easy job. Okay. But it's a good job to have, good to put on the resume, good responsibility. Traditionally at TCNJ, residential advisors are upperclassmen. Sophomores are considered, but traditionally they're juniors and seniors. You have to have a 3.0 GPA. You have to be in good standing. But if you are able, and we have a ton of RA positions on campus, but if you get an RA position, you get to live in a dorm for free and you get a stipend towards your meal plans. Okay. So at a $30,000 a year school like mine, that's a $12,000 value per year. Okay. So that means that you've just helped your parents out tremendously. 40% of your yearly college expenses have been absorbed by you working on campus on one of these jobs. Okay. So again, think outside the box like that, ambassadorships, tour guides, they don't, obviously not as much as advisors, but internships or co-ops, perhaps one semester you go and work under a co-op where you're saving, money on your school expenses, but then You're also making money, at that co-op and gaining some good experience, paid or unpaid internships, things like that. So think, it's that 4-year plan, think outside the box, but also do your private scholarship search, okay? I've given you here some reputable websites. The FastWeb one is a good one. Collegeboard.org is a good one. But I also recommend go out to the colleges and the institutions that your sons and daughters are applying to and look to see what they're through their private scholarship page, and see what private scholarships they have links to, okay? I could tell you at my school, if you went to my private outside scholarship link, it opens up a 17-page PDF document. There are about 3 to 5 different scholarship sources per page. They've all been vetted by my associates, so we know they're legit. They're not data mining or trying to scam you or something, so they're legit. Now, some of them are very specific, though. It could be geared towards a specific major or a specific GPA, or specific regional area, or the son of a child who was a Marine, let's say, like it could get that specific, okay? But they're out there, so don't be afraid to, whether it's through public websites, like you see the FastWeb of the college, or the college specific websites. Look, go to your organizations, civic organizations. If you're, a Rotary Club, Lions Club, Knights of Columbus, go to your church, your synagogue, your temple. Ask each of those institutions, hey, do you guys have scholarships? You do? Okay, great. How do I apply? I want my son to apply, things like that. Even your employer, a lot of people sometimes don't know, and this is more for somebody who works in a big company. Sometimes you go to HR office and your HR department, the company may have a scholarship, that the children of employees can apply for. Okay, so just keep in mind, again, it's a 4-year search, but you want to make sure that you've tapped as many resources as possible. Okay.
On that note, Will, we also keep, and most high schools do, we keep a local scholarship file in our counseling office. Miss Hastings, one of our assistants in the counseling office, does a phenomenal job with that. So, I'd welcome anybody to reach out to her, reach out to your child's counselor, and they can help you with that. We do, a lot of scholarships, a lot of awards. We have senior award night in the spring where we present a lot of those, and so that's certainly worth looking into on the local level. It might not be the dollar volume of some of these larger level scholarships, but we'll pay for some textbooks at least.
Absolutely. Dan, that is a great point. My wife's a teacher and she's been on some of the high school teacher and she's been on some of those scholarship committees. And look, the way I look at it is if somebody is willing to give my son a $500 scholarship by filling out an application and an essay and submitting a transcript, then sign me up. Okay. Yep. It's $500 less dollars I got to worry about. Okay. So, but that's a great point. State of New Jersey, he says, so, state of New Jersey is going to receive that FAFSA data, but they're also our state entity. They are available to you if you have any questions about completing the FAFSA or about the financial aid process, So I've given you their customer service number, their hours, their website is great. They have publications, for you. They have like a website where they have these different tabs and you can actually have different resources like college calculators, loan calculators, things like that. So any financial aid questions you have, you can always reach out to them. Obviously, you have your guidance office, the federal government through the FAFSA has an 800 number, but you have a great resource here that you can tap into. And when we do this outreach on behalf of the state, the state actually asks us in the aid community to do this. And this presentation is actually there. We tweak it a little, but it's actually there. So it's basically outreach that the state likes to do. So, they provide all their information, contact information. And finally, you reached the end, you've made it. So any additional questions that have come up either in the Q&A or on the chat, Dan, that we can answer?
We just have 2 more at this point, but anybody, if you have any more, feel free to type them in. We've taken care of a lot of it as we've gone along, so that's great. 2 more right now. When a school has dependent tuition benefits or consortium tuition exchange benefits, does a student who wants to take advantage of those still have to file a FAFSA or CSS?
I mean, you know what? For a consortium agreement, you do not have to have a FAFSA on file. A consortium agreement is basically an agreement between the 2 schools, and you're going to take classes at another school and you're going to be billed at one. But let's say you qualify for aid, then, you know, even though you can only receive aid at one institution, it's still going to perhaps going to assist you, you know? So also look, in order to apply for college loans, whether it's a loan through the student or a loan through the parent, you know, or you're applying for a loan through the state or the federal or private banks, you need to file a FAFSA. All of these loan entities want to see that you filed the FAFSA, that you've taken advantage of perhaps any lower interest loans or any lower, you know, like the general student loan for the student first before they can give you any of their loans. Okay, so you always want to do the FAFSA, and I always recommend do your FAFSA even if it's just your first year. All right, see if you qualify for something, or if you're going to need it for the loan, you're going to have to do it anyway. But see if you do. Then look, if you're going to be able to afford, you know, college on your own, you're not going to need loans for any of the future years, you don't have to do a FAFSA ever again. Okay, but at least give it a shot and do it the first year, you know, and see what, you know, see where the chips fall.
All right. And due to some complicating circumstances, I never completed my 2020 tax return, but I do have all the relevant information. Can I complete the FAFSA without having completed that return?
Absolutely. You can complete the FAFSA. You can indicate on the FAFSA that you will file a tax return and try and estimate, you know, your income as best as possible. Just keep in mind that, and although there's a process called verification, it's actually an audit of FAFSA records. And the federal government tells us that they select those randomly. And they also do not share with us who they pick for verification. So keep in mind that if you are selected for verification or you are selected for an audit, the school will not be able to complete the audit until they receive that income documentation or that tax return from you. So it may delay the processing of your son and daughter's aid. Okay, so even though you may be backed up, you know, it would still be highly recommended that you try and take care of that process as soon as you can.
Perfect. And how are non-college age siblings taken into account in FAFSA calculation?
Well, you know, remember, it's just the household size. So the bigger the household, the more mouths to feed, the more allowances you're going to get in the formula, you see. Now, I can't tell you specifically based on each individual person's income how they'll be looked at, but obviously, yes, a percentage of each child, you know, whether they're college age or non-college age, you know, will be taken into account in the formula.
All right. Very good. I don't see any more questions. If you have any, type them in now. But, you know, I think this was a super informative program. Like Will said earlier, the dialogue isn't over when we close the meeting today. I'll send the video out. I'll send the slides out. You know, always feel free to reach out with any further questions. We have a couple more. Deadline for FAFSA, and how are dependent savings accounts evaluated in FAFSA?
So the deadline for FAFSA varies by school. Okay, so the FAFSA that you're completing now, the deadline for that FAFSA is not until June 30th of 2023. But obviously, you want to fill out the FAFSA as soon as possible to be considered for aid for September of 2022, you know. But really what you need to be looking at is each individual school's deadline. So I have a soft deadline at TCNJ. We want everybody to file their FAFSA by February 15th of 2022. Okay, so that way we can receive that data and prepare a financial aid package by the time you have to make your May 1st decision. Okay, and then the second part, if you could say it again.
How are dependent savings accounts evaluated in FAFSA?
Okay, so when you're filling out the FAFSA, obviously parents are going to have their own section for assets, which savings account is one of them, and then the student is going to have their own section for that. So traditionally, the parents' assets, only 5% of a parent's assets are looked at towards college contribution. Okay, so if you have $100,000, real simple, FAFSA is going to expect at least $5,000 of that to go towards college education or the family contribution. On the student side, it's much higher. It's 20%. So again, on the flip side, if the student has $100,000 in the bank on their end, FAFSA or the college are going to expect $20,000 of that to go towards their college costs and expenses.
We had one regarding CSS, I guess, kind of revisiting what is CSS and is it a must?
Wow, they must have missed that whole section. It is in the presentation. No, remember, only 400 colleges and universities nationally require the CSS profile. So it is an institution-based application. So you have to find out from the individual schools that your sons and daughters are applying to whether they require that. Okay, so only if the institution requires it, do you have to fill out the CSS profile. Only the FAFSA is the one that everybody completes.
We have one, do application deadlines impact the FAFSA CSS deadlines? And they do, because you want the decisions in place before you make a decision, right? So it's, you know.
That's correct. That's pretty much common sense. Yes, of course.
Let's see. Follow up to that. How are younger sibling savings counted, as part of the parent savings number or the independent from it? I've heard contradictory things.
Well, I mean, if it's in the younger sibling's name, then it's not even counted on the FAFSA. Okay. So now, obviously, if the parent has, and I'll use the example of a 529, where the parent is the custodian of that 529 for multiple children, the parent must still list it under their main, they can under their asset, so it doesn't matter, for what student it's for. If you have $150,000 and it's for 3 children, it's still your asset. So you must list it. If the parent has one of these, like where the child is 15 years old and they opened up a bank account for them, and technically they're only the custodian because the bank wouldn't let somebody under 16 or whatever, then no, that doesn't get reported on the FAFSA.
How is a sibling's savings account considered if they're not going to college? That would just be the sibling's money, right?
Yeah, it's not counted on the FAFSA.
Yeah. Last one, it looks like, how are 529 accounts treated? Are they parents' assets or the students' assets?
Well, that depends.
Yeah.
I mean, it could be that you would have to find that out. I mean, it could be the parent asset, because you opened it on behalf of your child, or, it was opened, or you opened it on behalf of the child itself, or a relative, said, Johnny, I'm opening up an account for you and I'm putting money into it, but it's your account. So that depends. You'd have to reach out to the plan administrator to see, who is the account under, and then it would go in the according section of the FAFSA, whether it's a student or a parent asset.
Excellent. That's it. Everybody, feel free to reach out separately, but I just want to take a minute to thank Wil for joining us. Tremendous program. We could have our own little financial aid presentation and it wouldn't hold a candle to the information we get from, somebody who does it all day, every day at a school like TCNJ. So thank you so much. And, hopefully we'll keep doing this in the future.
Absolutely. And good luck to everybody. It's been a pleasure. I wish you the best, and thanks for having me. Have a great night.
All right. Thank you.